They say hindsight is 20/20ths, but if I'm being honest, even now, after everything, I still can't figure out exactly when the cracks started forming. My name's Mark, I'm 52 years old, and I've worked in construction project management for nearly 3 decades. I don't mean holding a hammer and swinging a drywall. I mean overseeing multi-million-dollar builds, walking through job sites in steel-toe boots 1 minute and shaking hands with developers in tailored button-downs the next. I'm not flashy, I'm not rich, but I've done well for myself. I've spent the last 22 years married to a woman I used to look at and think, damn, how did I get her? Sarah was the kind of woman that turned heads in grocery stores, poised, magnetic, always a step ahead when it came to fashion and charm. She worked part-time from home, calling herself a brand consultant, but honestly, most of her weeks were filled with yoga brunches, book clubs, and girls' weekends that kept getting more frequent. I never questioned it. I trusted her because that's what you do when you love someone. You trust until you have a reason not to. And I had no reason. At least, that's what I told myself. Sarah always knew how to make me feel like the luckiest fool in the room. Every time she laughed at my dumb work stories or ruffled my hair after a 12-hour day, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I was still the man she married in our 20s. She didn't nag, didn't complain about money, didn't even ask for much. I thought that meant she was content. Looking back now, I think she just didn't care. We never had kids, it just never happened, and maybe that created more space between us than I realized. But I filled the silence with purpose. I worked, I provided, I built a life that I thought we could both be proud of. A life I thought she was invested in. And just a few months ago, when I got promoted to senior project manager by Martin, my boss and someone I considered not just a mentor, but a genuine friend, I came home that night practically glowing. Sarah hugged me, kissed my cheek, called me her silver fox with a hard hat, and we drank wine on the patio like we used to. That night felt like a high point. I had no idea it was the prelude to a fall that would gut me from the inside out. Martin had always been one of those charismatic, well-groomed types who walked into a room and made every guy feel underdressed and every woman feel seen. He was sharp, driven, and somehow always one step ahead in every conversation. I admired the hell out of him, still do, in a strange, bitter way, but I never once suspected he'd be the one to make my entire world collapse in on itself. I didn't see it coming. Not the late meetings he scheduled without warning. Not the team-building retreat Sarah suddenly knew about before I did. And definitely not the fact that, while I was busy building the future for us, someone else was laying the foundation for my wife to walk away with everything, except the man she married. It started so subtly that I almost gaslit myself into believing I was imagining things, the way a man justifies a drop in temperature as just the wind, when the cold has already crept into his bones. Sarah, my Sarah, wasn't quite gone, but she was fading, like a song you used to hum every morning but can't seem to remember anymore. Meals stopped happening. I'd come home after 12-hour days on-site, boots dusted in concrete and back aching like an old bridge, and instead of the warmth of something on the stove or even takeout in the microwave, I'd find her on the couch, scrolling through her phone, smirking at something I wasn't part of. I'd ask how her day went, and she'd answer with a distracted, fine, not even lifting her eyes from the screen. She used to look at me like I was the main event. Now I was background noise, barely worthy of a glance. Then came the comments, needling little barbs disguised as observations. She started mentioning how tired I looked, how maybe I should start using that retinol cream her Pilates friend swore by. She said the living room felt dated, that maybe we needed to modernize our aesthetic, as if the home we'd built together had suddenly become offensive to her sense of design. She even joked once, only halfway, that I should ask Martin for a clothing allowance because I always looked like a high school shop teacher. That one stung more than I let on. The way she said his name, Martin, it started cropping up more and more in our conversations, even when it didn't belong there. Martin says construction's going to boom this year. Martin's got such a sharp sense of humor. Martin's wife doesn't cook either, and he seems fine with it. It was like the guy had crawled into the walls of our house, and I was the only one who hadn't noticed the infestation. But the timing, that's what really started making my skin crawl. Every time Martin called me after hours for an urgent file or a quick consult, Sarah suddenly had plans. Pilates class rescheduled. Wine night with the girls. Spa evening that went mysteriously late. I'd walk out the door, thinking about how lucky I was to be trusted with more responsibility, while she walked out of the same door with the kind of lipstick she hadn't worn in years. There was this one night, right before Christmas, when Martin asked me to stay late at the office to finish a client pitch deck. I got home around midnight, exhausted, and the bed was still made. She hadn't even bothered to fake it. Her phone was charging downstairs, and for the first time in our marriage, I stood in the kitchen wondering if I even wanted to know the password. Something was off, all right, off like a smoke detector in a burning room that nobody else seemed to hear. There's something strange about the way truth reveals itself. It never explodes into your life like a car crash or a lightning strike. No, it creeps in under the doorframe like smoke, silent and slow until you're choking and can't remember when you stopped breathing. That night, I wasn't looking for answers. I was just grabbing her coat from the closet because the temperature had dropped and we'd planned to take a walk around the neighborhood like we used to. It had been weeks since we'd done anything together that didn't involve passing each other like strangers in a train station. As I slipped my hand into the pocket to check for her gloves, I felt a crinkle, thin, glossy, folded twice. I pulled it out thinking it was a receipt for lunch or maybe some spa appointment she forgot to mention. But the moment I saw the logo Marriott, downtown, I knew this wasn't lunch. It was for a Thursday night. A one-night stay. Room 718. The name on the receipt didn't say Sarah Harper. It said Elaine D. I stared at it like it was a foreign language until the memory slammed into me like a punch to the ribs. Martin had shown me his credit card statement the day before during a billing dispute. I remembered the room number. 718. I don't even remember walking up the stairs. I just remember standing in the bedroom doorway holding the receipt in both hands, like some kind of twisted love letter that had been misdelivered. She was putting on mascara, humming, like nothing was wrong in the world. I held it out to her like it was radioactive. "What's this, Sarah?" I asked, and my voice didn't even sound like my own. She barely blinked, glanced at it, let out a breathy laugh that I swear will echo in my head until the day I die. "Oh my God, Mark. You're being paranoid," she said, rolling her eyes with that condescending half-smile that made me feel 10 inches tall. That was the night I stayed with Claire. We had wine, watched a movie, girl stuff. She booked it under her friend's rewards account. That's why the name's weird. She took the receipt from my hand, crumpled it, tossed it in the trash like it meant nothing. Like I meant nothing. Then she added, "Honestly, I think it's a little sad that you're snooping through my pockets." I wanted, desperately, to believe her. I needed to believe her because the alternative was too cruel, too humiliating to even entertain. Claire was her best friend from college. They had wine nights all the time. Maybe it was true. Maybe the hotel thing was just convenient, just easier. But something had cracked. I could feel it in my chest, a jagged fracture that didn't bleed, just burned. Her words might have made sense, but the way she said them didn't. She didn't sound hurt that I'd accused her. She didn't sound nervous or defensive. She sounded bored, like a woman who had rehearsed the lie so many times that she didn't need to think about it anymore. I nodded like I accepted her answer, walked out of the room like I was going to drop it. But inside me, something had changed forever. That was the night I stopped asking questions. That was the night I started looking for proof. There comes a point in a man's life where the pain of not knowing becomes sharper than the knife of the truth itself, and I had reached that point the moment Sarah looked me in the eyes and fed me that lie with the same casual confidence she used to order her almond milk lattes. I didn't react, not then. I didn't yell or accuse or storm out. Instead, I did something worse. I smiled, nodded, and left her alone with her wine and her secret. Because deep down, some part of me had already accepted what I didn't want to face. But I wasn't going to walk away empty-handed, and I sure as hell wasn't going to be made a fool of. So that week, I became a different kind of husband, one who installs a GPS tracker behind the spare tire of his wife's car, one who buys a burner phone from a gas station 2 towns over just to communicate in silence, and one who spends half a paycheck hiring a private investigator named Greg who smelled like tobacco and bad coffee but looked me in the eye like a man who's seen every kind of betrayal and doesn't flinch anymore. It didn't take long. Less than a week later, Greg texted me a series of time-stamped photos that hit like hammers against the inside of my skull. Sarah, my wife, the woman who once cried in my arms when her mother died, was stepping out of her Lexus and walking into the downtown Marriott in a red coat I'd bought her for Christmas 2 years earlier. She looked stunning, like something out of a movie. Her hair perfect, heels clicking with purpose, her posture confident. And worse than the photos? The timestamp. Because while she was walking into a hotel with the grace of a woman who knew exactly what she was doing, I was sitting at the office, alone, poring over blueprints and reworking a report that Martin had urgently requested I revise by morning. While I was grinding out spreadsheets under fluorescent lights, she was slipping into silk sheets bought with his company bonus. I stared at the pictures until my vision blurred, until the silence in the room became deafening, until my hand clenched so hard the burner phone cracked slightly along the side. The next morning, God help me, she brought me coffee in bed like nothing happened. Light roast with a splash of oat milk, just how I like it. She kissed me on the forehead, called me babe, and asked if I had time to fix the sink in the upstairs bathroom before the weekend. Her eyes didn't twitch. Her hands didn't shake. She smiled like the same woman I'd married, like the last 24 hours had been filled with yoga mats and Pinterest boards instead of moans behind blackout curtains. And I, an idiot still grasping at pieces of a life that no longer existed, just sipped the coffee. It tasted bitter. Or maybe that was just me. The smartest decision I ever made was the one that went against every instinct screaming inside my chest. Don't confront her. Not yet. Not while her lies are still fresh and her confidence is at its peak. I realized that if I exploded now, I'd walk straight into the fire without armor, without strategy, without leverage. So instead, I smiled when she kissed me. I kissed her back. I laughed at her jokes, folded her laundry, poured her wine, and told her I loved her while I stared directly into the face of the woman who was methodically dismantling the life I'd spent 2 decades building. I didn't rage. I didn't accuse. I took notes. And when she left for another girls' weekend that Friday, I didn't cry. I went downtown and met with a divorce attorney named Rachel Brewster who had the steely gaze of a woman who'd gutted more cheating spouses than a butcher in a slaughterhouse. Rachel didn't flinch when I showed her the photos. She didn't gasp or frown. She just nodded, reached for a legal pad, and started drawing battle lines in perfect cursive. "You're going to play the long game," she said, "because right now she thinks you're weak." I followed every word she gave me like scripture. First, we opened a bank account under a trust in a different state, Nevada, specifically, where asset tracing gets murky without a subpoena. Then, we quietly shifted a percentage of our joint savings into it, under the guise of investment diversification. I rerouted my paycheck through a solo LLC she didn't even know existed. I adjusted the beneficiaries on my retirement plan and had all future bonus checks redirected. She wouldn't see it coming. Meanwhile, I started combing through every document she'd signed over the past 5 years. Credit cards, home equity lines, subscription services. I wanted a map of her spending, her passwords, her secrets. And the deeper I went, the more I discovered. She wasn't just unfaithful, she was reckless. And then there was Martin, my so-called mentor, my boss, the man who'd patted my back while he stabbed it. At the office, I began documenting everything. Every late-night call. Every verbal order that contradicted protocol. Every backdoor deal he tried to slip past accounting. I forwarded emails to a private server, screen-recorded Zoom calls when his tone got too casual, even planted a voice recorder in my briefcase during our weekly one-on-ones. If he wanted to play dirty, I'd bring the whole goddamn construction empire down with receipts. And through it all, I kept showing up, smiling, working, being the dependable team player who never missed a deadline. But inside I was a storm coiling into silence, building speed, calculating every strike. Because the one thing Sarah forgot in her fantasy was this: she married a builder, and I know exactly how to tear down a structure without anyone noticing, until the day it collapses. The irony hit me harder than I expected. After months of subtle investigation, legal maneuvering, and ironclad emotional restraint, the moment that changed everything came from the simplest mistake imaginable: a single misfired text. I was upstairs replacing a ceiling light fixture in the guest room, wires dangling and sweat on my brow, when I heard her phone buzz on the kitchen island. Normally, I wouldn't have touched it, but something about the sharp ping, it wasn't her usual ringtone, made my instincts twitch. I walked down, wiped my hands, and checked the screen. The message preview read like a punch to the gut wrapped in red lace. "Can't wait to feel you again." Same room. My hands stopped moving. The air left my lungs, and I felt the world narrow to the width of that glowing screen. She hadn't even saved his name. The message came from a random number, but I didn't need confirmation. I knew exactly who it was. I unlocked her phone with the same calm I used to level foundation beams. The phone didn't ask for a passcode. I guess she really thought I was that predictable, that docile, that stupid. I stared at the message for a long time, then typed back with fingers steadier than they had any right to be. "Already booked. See you at 9. I watched the bubbles appear, then disappear. No follow-up message. No suspicion. That was it. The trap was set, and this time, I wasn't just playing defense. I was drawing the damn playbook. I called Greg, The PI told him to be outside the downtown Marriott at exactly 8:45, camera ready, engine running. Then I shaved, put on my cleanest dress shirt, and grabbed the same leather-bound notebook I used for my legal appointments. I wanted to look composed, like a man closing a chapter, not a heartbroken husband spiraling into chaos. By 8:59, I was already at the bar in the hotel lobby, sipping a double whiskey neat, the glass cool against my fingertips but the liquid doing nothing to soothe the inferno in my chest. Every second ticked like thunder. I positioned myself facing the entrance, pretending to scroll through sports scores on my phone while my pulse thudded behind my temples like war drums. I don't know what I expected, tears? Guilt? That small voice in her that used to tell her right from wrong? What I didn't expect, and what cut me in a place I didn't even know existed, was how happy she looked when she walked in. Hair done, lips painted, wearing that same coat I once zipped for her during our weekend trip to Asheville, when I still thought I was the only man in her world. Her eyes sparkled, her phone in hand, scanning the lobby, looking for him. Not me. Not the man who paid for that coat, that hotel, that life. No, she was looking for my boss. And she had no idea I was about to burn their little world down to ash. There's a kind of silence that doesn't feel like peace. It feels like pressure, like a calm ocean surface with a hurricane spinning just beneath, waiting to rise. That's what it felt like in that hotel lobby. I sat there, whiskey warming my veins, pretending to scroll through a phone I wasn't even looking at, every nerve in my body vibrating like it had a wire running straight into hell. I spotted her before she spotted him. Sarah walked in with the confidence of a woman on the hunt, in that black dress that I hadn't seen in over a year, the one she swore didn't fit anymore. Her hair was done up in the style she used to save for anniversaries, her heels clicking against the marble like a ticking clock winding down to judgment. She didn't hesitate, didn't glance around nervously or pause like someone ashamed. No, she moved like a woman with a purpose, a woman who had done this before, many times. She wasn't new to this sin. She was fluent in it. And then he walked in, Martin, the man I'd once toasted beers with at company parties, the man who stood at my side when I buried my father. He strolled in like he owned the place, because in some ways, he did. Tall, polished, arrogant as ever. He walked right up to her like it was the most natural thing in the world and didn't even bother checking his surroundings. No hesitation, no shame. He leaned in, wrapped an arm around her waist, and kissed her on the lips in full view of the hallway security mirror and, more importantly, in full view of the tiny lens I knew Greg had hidden just over the elevator entrance. The timing was perfect. Greg and I had practiced this from every angle. She giggled, that same laugh I once fell in love with, then whispered something in his ear that made Martin smile like a wolf just before a kill. It was the smile that broke something inside me for good. But I didn't move. I didn't storm in. I didn't flip the table or throw a punch. I did the one thing they never expected. I watched. I watched every second. I recorded it from my own phone too, just to layer redundancy into the evidence. I watched her run her fingers down his chest like she used to do with mine when we were young and stupid and still believed in forever. I watched him press the elevator button while holding her hand like a trophy, not a stolen wife. I watched the doors close on their betrayal like curtains drawing down on the final act of a bad play. And when it was done, I finished my whiskey, slid a $20 bill under the glass, nodded once to Greg, waiting by the exit in his sedan with a hard drive already backing up the footage, and I walked out into the night. Not broken, not even angry anymore, just focused. Because now, I had everything I needed, and they had no idea what was coming. There's a special kind of stillness in the air right before you walk into a room knowing you're about to change the balance of power forever. And that Monday morning, as I stepped out of the elevator and toward the executive wing, that stillness felt electric, alive, almost, like it had been waiting for me to take my shot. I was dressed for war. Charcoal gray suit, polished shoes, not a wrinkle in sight. But it wasn't the outfit that gave me that weight in my steps. It was what I carried under my arm. A leather binder filled with evidence, time-stamped videos, screenshots, voice notes, copies of emails that painted a picture not just of a cheating spouse, but of a man in power abusing his position in ways the company's legal team would not overlook. I had already briefed HR and legal the night before. Greg, my PI, had friends in compliance, and together we assembled a file so airtight it could choke a snake. I walked into Martin's office at 9 a.m. sharp. He smiled, called me champ, and motioned toward the coffee machine, still smug, still blind. That smile didn't last long. When HR and legal followed me in, two women with serious expressions and a portable file scanner, Martin's brows drew together in slow-motion confusion. "What's this?" he asked, chuckling nervously, like someone pretending not to notice the loaded gun pointed at his chest. I said nothing at first. I opened the binder, turned it toward him. Page 1. A photograph of him and Sarah, wrapped in each other in the hallway of the downtown Marriott. Page 2. An email he sent me at 6:42 p.m. that same night, demanding I stay late to finalize a non-existent budget revision. Page 3. A calendar screenshot, showing a pattern of after-hours assignments lining up with her GPS tracker logs. And so it went. When he tried to speak, legal cut him off. "Mr. Donovan," she said sharply, "you are being presented with evidence of ethical misconduct, time theft, and abuse of authority, all of which carry consequences both within and outside this company. You may wish to consult counsel before responding." Martin looked at me like a man seeing a ghost. No, not a ghost, a reckoning. He didn't say a word. What happened next was quicker than I expected, but not nearly as satisfying as I'd hoped. HR pulled out the paperwork. He was offered a quiet resignation, no severance, no letter of recommendation, and an NDA with teeth. He took it. Cowards like him always do. Then came the twist. HR turned to me and said, "Given your record and what you've uncovered, the board has asked if you'd like to step into the role permanently. Or, if you'd prefer, we can offer you an exit package equal to his." It wasn't a hard choice. I didn't want to walk away with a check. I wanted to walk away with his chair. I took the job. I stood in the same room he once used to manipulate me, and I signed the contract with the same pen he kept on his desk. And when I shook the legal officer's hand, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Control. Not rage. Not grief. Just calm, steady control. The kind a man earns when he plays the long game and wins. There's something almost surgical about revenge done right. Not wild or emotional. Not screaming matches or shattered glass, but precise, cold, deliberate, like a scalpel sliding through skin without ever drawing a scream. That night, after clearing out my files from Martin's office and locking in my first executive decision as the new director, I came home with just one item in hand. A manila envelope sealed with quiet finality. Inside it were the divorce papers, pre-reviewed by Rachel Brewster and ready to be served, though I thought it only fitting she received them from me. Not a process server. Not a stranger. Me. The man she used to call her protector. The man she betrayed. I placed it on the kitchen table beside the wine glass she'd left half full, like she always did when she was too distracted with texts to finish it. My dog, Max, my one loyal companion through this mess, sat by the door with his leash already clipped, like he knew what this night meant before I even said a word. When Sarah walked in 20 minutes later, still wearing that damn yoga outfit she used to throw on after her hotel rendezvous, I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. I just nodded toward the table. She saw the envelope, walked over like she thought it was a tax form or something harmless. But the second she read the cover letter, saw the word dissolution, her face drained of color so fast, it was like watching a light switch flicked off inside her soul. What is this?" she whispered, already breathless, already unraveling. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The proof was already filed. The photos, the emails, the timeline, all included, all irrefutable. "Mark, no, this didn't mean anything," she stammered, the panic rising like floodwater. "It was stupid. It was just a mistake. I never meant to hurt you." She cried. She screamed. She begged. And for the first time in months, I felt absolutely nothing. No anger. No grief. Just clarity. I looked her square in the eyes, the way I used to when I said my vows, and with a calmness that I knew would haunt her far longer than rage ever could, I said, "You're not the woman I married. And I'm not the fool you thought I was." I picked up the single suitcase I'd packed with what I needed, clipped Max's leash to my wrist, and walked out the front door without slamming it. No last glance. No parting shot. No promises. I left everything else, furniture, the house, her memories, all of it. Because that wasn't my home anymore. It was a crime scene dressed in Pottery Barn, and I refused to sleep in it another night. Everything else was hers for now. But justice? That was mine. and she had no idea how much more was still coming. 1 year later, I'm not the same man who once sat at a kitchen table swallowing betrayal like poison laced with politeness. These days, I wake up in a condo overlooking the harbor, not in the house where trust went to die. I travel. I hike. I've picked up photography, joined a cycling group, and started dating a woman who doesn't lie through perfect teeth. She laughs with her whole face, asks real questions, and doesn't clutch her phone like it holds sacred secrets. Most weekends, I take Max, still loyal, still my shadow, and we drive out to places where no one knows my name or my story. And that peace? It's a different kind of wealth, one you don't see coming, but when it hits, it changes everything. I sleep better. I eat better. Hell, I look better. Turns out betrayal might break your heart, but surviving it, thriving beyond it, that builds a man out of whatever pieces are left. As for Sarah, well, poetic justice writes its own verses. Word got around fast, especially after Martin's resignation. It wasn't just whispers at wine nights or judgmental glances at her yoga class anymore. Her friends disappeared like leaves in a storm, unsure if loyalty to her would cost them socially or professionally. She tried dating again. I know because someone sent me the screenshots, but the men she went after only saw her as what she'd become, the woman who slept her way into her husband's corner office. That title doesn't wear well in country clubs and book clubs. Her reputation, once pristine, unraveled thread by thread. The alimony she fought so hard for didn't stretch far without my income, and the house, hers in the divorce, became a burden she couldn't afford to keep. I heard she sold it last month. Cheap. Quietly. Her name's still on it, but someone else is living in our memories now. I never spoke to her again. Never returned a single one of her calls. Didn't answer when she emailed that she wasn't doing well or texted on what would have been our anniversary. Because you see, I already said everything I needed to the night I left. I let the evidence speak. I let the court speak. I let her new silence speak louder than anything I ever could. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but I prefer mine legal, documented, and delivered by courier.